Hi, Carmelle. Welcome to this call today. Uh, so maybe you can start by, introducing yourself and tell us who you are.
Sure. Thanks for having me, David. So my name is Carmelle Cadet. I'm the founder and CEO of Emtech. We are a fintech for central banks and helping regulators really navigate through the journey of innovation, of emerging technologies. We build technology for central banks and regulators specifically. So background, spent the last 10 years at IBM. So my background is in corporate finance. For enterprise IT, did that at a global level for over 10 years. And then I started Emtech because I wanted to solve a problem around financial inclusion. I'm originally from Haiti in the Caribbean. That's a problem that I know very well growing up there, and saw the opportunity around blockchain technology, big data, open banking. And as central banks were deciding to look at blockchain, I thought there was a great opportunity to try to solve a problem around financial inclusion by helping regulators and central banks adopt blockchain and modern technology. So that's what we do.
All right. That's good to hear. I mean, how long have you been in the blockchain and crypto space, Carmelle?
So I'm going to count 2016 just because I had a lot of ideas when I was at IBM. I was going to leave IBM and find a startup and blockchain company to work for. And then around that time, the CEO of IBM announced IBM blockchain division. So I said, okay, fine, I'll stay. But around that time, I had my baby and I remember being on maternity leave when the new division was getting kicked off. So I did a deep dive while I was on 3 months leave, watched a lot of YouTube videos, got familiar with Bitcoin, bought my first crypto while I was wanting to try it out. And I was so proud of myself, but I actually got my private and public key correct and save kindly. I thought I was very proud of myself for figuring out the maze. But going through that, I knew there was going to be a barrier of entry when it comes to users that are not very technical, and what does that mean for people like my mom and who are paying a lot of high fees for payments and have to leave the house and go to a Western Union and go process a payment. For me, the technology became such a mind opening type of breakthrough to say, what can we do with this? And sure enough, I think since then, so that's 4 years ago because my son is 4. Really getting into the crypto space has been very, very interesting. But I'm a big believer of blockchain too, which is amazing technology.
All right. All right, that's good to hear. I mean, we all have a story on, how we got into the space. So that's obviously an interesting story. Now, a lot of us, I think, know you from your work on the African continent, mostly with your recent partnership with the Bank of Ghana. But just before we even go there, maybe you can let us know, what products or what solutions have you been building as Emtech, for the space?
Yeah, when I left IBM, I had the opportunity to start working with the Central Bank of Bahamas on their central bank digital currency. We got very lucky, partnered with the NZIA company that's building the overall payment network, and got to start talking about how does CBDC work in cross-border payment. And that's what we continue to help the central bank with. So we have more work to do there. A big focus and big success on how they're rolling it out and how they tested the technology. So kudos to the governor, because that took a lot of courage to be the first one, to be the one to say that we're going to try it out. But Bahamas is a smaller country, and some would say, well, they can afford to do that. But what emerged for us is also a broader opportunity, because after Bahamas, I kind of hit the road, spending a lot of time in Africa. Funny story, I did my exit interview at IBM from Nairobi. I was already on the ground.
Kudos to
By the
Nairobi. Mhm.
I said, this is, it's something is happening here and, I gotta go. So for me, seeing the opportunity in Africa around digital currency has always been kind of in the forefront even since 2018. But when we started talking to several central banks, I remember talking to even to the Kenyan Central Bank. There's a journey that needs to happen as a regulator on why you should care about technology. Technically, as a central bank, you should be technology agnostic. You're really looking at risk. You're looking at how to maintain stability, and that traditionally has been done more through policies and economic levers that don't necessarily rely or get impacted as much by technology, but now it does. And the counter effect to monetary policy that comes with the use of technology really forces them to think through what are those new risks. But every central bank, is not like the Bahamas, where they can, kind of see how the evolution of technology is going to impact them. So when we started talking to other central banks in Africa about central bank digital currency, that's something that was not particularly intuitive for them as a place to start. Project Porca is an example of the Reserve Bank of South Africa starting to test blockchain on more interbank payment settlement aspect of it. So they picked the scope, they tested it out, but it wasn't particularly intuitive. And as we spent also a lot of time in West Africa, and part of the need that emerged for us, and we discovered while being on the road, is that central banks needed a way to transition to become innovative, to even think about themselves as innovators. And the concept of a regulatory innovation sandbox really was kind of a breakthrough moment for us, and understanding what does a regulator need in order for them to feel comfortable understanding innovation, collaborating with the innovators, but also maintaining um, a sense of independence and being able to survive their mandates in a new way. So that's where we started building, we looked around, many central banks and regulatory authorities had the concept of a sandbox. But as we talked to fintechs and the audience that the sandbox is supposed to be talking to and targeting, did not know how the sandbox worked. They see the policies, they see the announcements, they see the website, they see the forms, but it wasn't something that a lot of fintechs were able to really get a lot of results through. It's paper-based, you fill out the paperwork, you submit it, the process might say it takes 3 weeks or 3 months, but it might be 12 months before you hear anything back. If there's no regulatory framework for what you want to do, then the process says, well, you really can't bring the solution to market because there's no regulatory framework. So there was a lot of conflict and that, well-intended collaboration. And as we talked to several central banks, we saw the opportunity and fintechs too. We talk to a lot of fintechs. What would it look like if we actually built a platform, a software platform that allows that collaboration to happen in a more valuable way? So that is the first product that we officially introduced. We've been talking to the Bank of Ghana for quite a while, and the governor expressed its desire to have a digital sandbox or a sandbox component as part of their strategy and innovation strategy. So we approached them and said, look, here's what we're thinking, here's our prototype, here's how the solution will really help you. And we were able to sit down with the central bank and really understand what would be the mandate, what would be the rules, and pitch them something that that they found valuable. So that's what we're working on with them right now. It's currently in pilot, and I think you'll hear more as a result emerge.
All right, great. I think you working with Bank of Ghana was quite a story, actually. I mean,
Yes.
if I just can dive into that, like, how do you even start that conversation with a regulator? Because I think for many in the space, I think that has always been a big problem. Like, how do we start even engaging with the regulators? And would you say it was unique? Was Bank of Ghana unique? Because I'm sure you've talked with many regulators before.
Yeah, I think one thing that is required for, to make our life easier and our engagement with the regulator is at least an openness to something new, openness to understand, openness to see what's available. Because I'm not a central banker, the first thing I did was to get an advisor at the company to help me think through what does a central banker think about and what keeps them up at night. What is their language? And then we took that and built technology for that. So when we walk into a central bank meeting, or if we were to ask for a meeting, we're not asking to, for you to approve a banking license, and we have no money, and we have, we won't tell you what KYC and AML we're doing. We're really kind of coming in saying, you as a regulator, we're building technology for you because your role as a regulator is being challenged in some ways. But also the modernization and the opportunity that you can tap into can help you do your job better. Because from my experience, I know central banking does not get a lot of good reputation given how conservative the the bodies can be, and some central banks are more than others. But across the board, there is a sense of responsibility. There is a sense of, we are the cops. We are the ones that are supposed to keep things afloat. And if we do something that, unleash a flood of risk into the market, it's very hard to really walk that back. So whatever they do needs to be thoughtful. What's unique, and taking that into consideration, what we say is, look, we build technology in a way that makes it easier for you to test it without destabilizing the status quo. For example, the sandbox is happening right now. There's nothing that's disrupting what the BOG is doing on a day-to-day basis, right? Although at the end, whether there's a lot of solutions that emerge in the market, but that would be something that's monitored, that's phased, that's understood, and went through a process that allows them to get some comfort, data, visibility, because as you know, APIs are kind of the new ways of communicating. The two systems can communicate to each other. So how can you get data to present it in a way to a regulator to feel comfortable with innovations going to the market? That's the secret sauce for us, and trying to do that is, and trying to present that in a way to the central banks to say, this is what this can do for you. We are a partner. We build technology thinking and thinking about how you can do what you do, but also in a way that we understand can bring much value to the broader ecosystem down the line. So financial inclusion and financial market resilience, access to fintechs to be able to solve problems that the central banks on their own cannot fix. They need fintechs to solve those problems, but how do you create the regulatory framework to enable that safely is what we help them do.
Speaking of regulatory sandboxes, especially across Africa, you're seeing, a number of sandboxes pop up. We have one in Kenya, we have one in Nigeria as well, I believe. We have one in South Africa, and obviously in Ghana. When you look at these sandboxes, and obviously you're already playing in that space, would you say they are facilitating when it comes to regulation? Are they really helping regulators understand, this technology as it is, as opposed to, say, not having a sandbox at all and just trying to see how this will play out?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at quite a few sandbox policies that central banks present. So, from Nigeria to South Africa to Kenya, Sierra Leone, um, Tunisia at some point, and also in the Caribbean, where Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago are good central banks that actually publish good sandboxes. What we hear from a market perspective is that the fintechs don't particularly feel that it's structured for them to have new ideas. A lot of sandbox policies seem to at least favor the status quo or the current licensed players. But if the intent of the sandbox is to get exposed to new technologies and new players, then you kind of have to build a sandbox framework that gives you that environment, right? That sets those rules. And what does that look like? For us, being the fintech for central banks, when we look at what the fintech need, sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with the regulator review, meaning the fintechs need somewhere to test their platform. They need some, place to get their APIs, get ready to go to market. How do you make it easy for them to understand regulatory requirements that sometimes can be very confusing and overlapping? They need multiple regulator approval. And it's really cumbersome sometimes. And especially if you want to do a product that is cross-border, like cross-border payment or cross-border trade, forget about it. You have to go to multiple countries and multiple regulators and get approval, all that sense. And regulators don't do a good job of coming together for the purpose of servicing the fintech. It's not part of their job, to be honest with you, to make your life easier. And this is where we come in. They have their job to do. Their job is hard enough, trying to understand what the heck you want to do, let alone to make your life easy as you go to market. So we play that role in where we can say, regulator, you focus on your regulatory review process, and the fintech, we help them get ready for pre-regulatory review, for the regulatory review process. And that itself, when you think about the gaps that may exist in today's sandbox policies, that's another aspect of it. So the openness to new type of companies and new solutions, your fintech, your sandbox framework has to be open to that. And in addition, what are the ways that you can foster that collaboration more efficiently is something that leaves a gap, because the fintech is focusing on their product and what they have to do to go to market. The regulator is working on what they need to do to understand what the solution is and what the technology and what the risks are. There's, bring that collaboration and bring those parties together is what our sandbox can do very well.
Right. Let me ask, what, for those maybe who don't understand what a regulatory sandbox is, is it a physical location, or how does a sandbox look like?
Yeah, very good question. So I'll give a bit of history in this case. The concept of a sandbox is generally a place where you go and try new things, right? You have new ideas and you don't know if they're going to work or not, but you need a place to test them out. In the case of financial services, it is a highly regulated industry. And therefore, you're testing something new on a technology side, but sometimes, a lot of time now, you end up having to test new regulatory regime that needs to fit the new technology. Not because the regulator should have an opinion on one technology or the other. It's about understanding the risks of a particular new technology, meaning that every blockchain protocol, for example, introduce different components that you might want to worry about when it comes to the security, when it comes to access, when it comes to node management, and so on. Or when a mobile app is being deployed, if your internal processes are not the latest, or do you really have the best consumer protection capabilities when you're launching a new wallet, for example. So those are the things that, from a testing perspective, you might be doing it for the first time. And there might not be any current regulatory framework that covers you on how to do that in the market today. And then the regulator sometimes does not know how to give you that regulatory clarity because they don't know how you're going to take this particular protocol, what are you going to do with it, how are you going to customize it to make it do what you want it to do. And the idea for us is it's one thing to have a physical central bank that you walk into and go talk to the Sandbox team, right? And do a presentation and submit a lot of paperwork for them to review and then they get back to you. The opportunity that we saw in digitizing that process is not only taking paper and giving you an online portal. What's also missing is the value around the data that the central banks eventually need in order for them to understand and continue to monitor. Nothing is, seeing one data point today does not tell you everything. If a solution is going to market, part of the evaluation that the central bank is doing or a regulator is doing is seeing, what is the adoption rate? Do people really want this? Is this solving a problem? Is it solving a gap, but is it done in a safe way? And in the sandbox, there are a lot of questions, right? That's what people do. People ask questions in sandbox, and you use the sandbox to get answers. So for us, we took it a step further with that basic understanding and saying, well, you're asking question as a regulator. Sometimes the best way for you to get your answers is to watch it live, is to watch it work, because the fintech is going to tell you something. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know. A lot of companies think they're going to win a big market and then they introduce a product that doesn't take off. So sometimes you have to let the solution go to market. And what we are able to do with a digital sandbox is allow the regulator to be able to seamlessly, safely, transparently monitor that new technology in order for them to understand the risk, but also in the sandbox to come up with a new regulatory regime. So that's what we call regulatory innovation, where as a regulator, you're also innovating in the type of policies that you need to put in place for the new risk. Then discovering the risk can happen very efficiently on the sandbox. Instead of taking one person at a time in an office and be in meetings all day, having the online tools and capabilities and APIs and dashboards that make that data more analytical and can help them assess risk is something that we think is very valuable.
All right. I mean, quite a lot of information to assimilate, but I think
Yes,
it's quite informative, I guess, to, a lot of people who are really looking at this space, and especially on the African continent. And I know you've had quite some experience around the continent. And speaking of that, when you look at the continent, the African continent, what's your view of digital currencies on the continent? How do you see the regulatory space evolving now with the sandboxes and other regulations that come into place? How do you see digital currencies evolving across Africa?
Great question. So I started on telling you what we heard from the central bank when we hit the road, when I started Emtech. They needed a path to transition, but I started talking about central bank digital currency first. I didn't go in talking about Sandbox. I went in talking about central bank digital currency because personally, I'm a big believer in the just not to sound too, too abstract, right? But it's such a timely opportunity because this technology is so different and it is actually transforming the relationship between banks and people and businesses, and there are emerging players. So you have a change that's happening here that's going to reorder certain pieces of the financial market. And I like to say that this is such a unique opportunity for Africa to own their currency systems. I mean, the concept of issuing your own digital currency really puts you in control on the mechanics. One thing people, and why blockchain is such an interesting, technology, and why I'm a big believer on why central banks should adopt blockchain to do digital currency, is because the programmability. It's a concept of you can essentially program. It's a software that lets you program on how your country's currency is designed. What are the rules that govern that currency? And you are in charge of it because it's being done with a technology. And sometimes people are scared because of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is ran by an algorithm and by miners, and the economics of it is very detached from a centralized party. But that's not the only thing that you can do with blockchain. You can actually create your own currency with blockchain and do and tell um, the currency what the rules you want it to follow. And that's an opportunity here when I think about the central banks in Africa, given the lack of liquidity, given the lack of trade and a lot across the continent, which is lower than the EU, lower than the US, to talk about what are the opportunities around taking control of your currency system in the context of Africa, in a context of healthcare, in the context of growth, even in agriculture and local investment. There are so many use cases that can be enabled if a country as an infrastructure offers a digital currency platform. There's a lot that can be done, and I think the central banks have a unique opportunity, especially those in Africa, have a unique opportunity to leapfrog at their level. So central banking leapfrogging. So we've seen a lot of leapfrogs, especially M-Pesa. The world heard about M-Pesa, the innovation heard around the world, that leapfrogged Africa into a mobile money era. And that happened at the retail level. So imagine if I told you that central bank digital currency was that level of leapfrogging, but at the central banking level, that the infrastructure to provide a different technology and future proofing how innovators and how retail versus institutions build on top of it. I think that's something that could be very, very powerful for Africa specifically.
All right.
I think you'd see a lot to even investors wanting to get into this game. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just to put you on the spot, when you look at the African continent, which country do you feel is like, a step ahead of the rest when it comes to digital currencies?
You're trying to get me in trouble. No. So I'll use public information. I think there's enough breadcrumbs that you can. I don't have insight into who's going to be the first. That's hard to see, but definitely South Africa was the first country on the continent to get involved. I think you're having different dynamics that are going to be pushing a bit of a race at some point, but I won't be surprised if you see something emerging from West Africa as well. Based on my conversation in East Africa, I have to reconnect. It was further out than what I heard and what I saw in West Africa. And at least the English West Africa specifically. There's a lot of talk around the echo for the French-speaking West Africa. I think that's still out. The jury is still out on how that will pan out. But right now, you really need one or two, right? And in the three corners day to kind of pull the trigger, and that's something I think you'll see over the next 12 months. You'll see someone come out. Project Porca is on phase 2. That's for the retail CBDC. I think that has a good chance of coming forward, but COVID took a bit of a toll on that. But in a way, COVID made the case for digital currency at the central bank level. I think the cryptocurrency mania kind of forces them to think about what is their role and how can they participate more effectively in that. So I think it's going to be an interesting and a very interesting time. But you know, that is the second product that we're building in Emtech. Aside from the sandbox, we have a very focused approach when it comes to central bank digital currency. We want to help central banks digitize paper cash. So instead of printing cash, the value proposition is how can you establish, instead of the paper cash infrastructure that you have in your country, how can you also build a digital cash infrastructure? And that it's not just a piece of software, it's the ecosystem and the rules and the governance and the policies that would drive something like this, where every country would have a digital cash infrastructure. We think it's a very a powerful way for central banks to get a seat at the table, to continue to be the cops, but in a way that really enables the next generation of digital currencies in their countries.
All right. We definitely look forward to that. I think M-Pesa has shown us that it's actually possible. So definitely, I think that's a novel idea. Now, Carmelle, as we wind up, maybe I can ask, you have a lot of plans, obviously, for the African continent. 2021 and beyond, what can we look forward to from you and from Emtech? And also, when you look at the space as well, what do you see, this year and moving forward?
Yeah, I think this year we're going to talk a lot about the benefits that we are bringing to fintechs and central banks through the digital sandbox. That's something we think is going to be quite of a game changer in the sense of changing the relationship, fostering the engagement, and making regulatory review and making regulatory clearance faster for fintechs. There is so much to unlock there for Africa in a sense of the regulatory clarity alone that central banks can provide through a digital sandbox like ours, can really foster not only local investment but also foreign direct investments. When you think about the talent and the innovation that's happening in Africa, everyone wants in. And it's such an opportunity for countries to get money into the, not only into the government but into the economy. I mean, you look at the unicorns that are coming out across Africa right now, and I think that's just the beginning. That is just the beginning. And changing the regulatory landscape for it to be a bit more collaborative with innovation will do a lot as far as investors feeling comfortable in investing in more fintechs and more money in Africa. And I think that's an untapped opportunity.
Right. We can't wait to see, what 2021 and beyond, will have for us. When can we expect you in Nairobi, Kenya?
Actually, I'll be there in September. We will probably definitely be talking about CBDC then and Sandbox at the time. Those are our key focus as far as the market that we're going after right now, really helping central banks becoming innovative and then launching their digital currencies. Those are very powerful, big projects, but we have some really good partners, some big partners. We are a young firm, but we are not young, from experience. We are a startup, but we are actually quite old when it comes to the industry. So that's something that I look forward to speaking a lot more about, how we Emtech can help central banks navigate this digital currency and this innovation wave. So I think you're going to hear a lot about those two things over the next 12 months.
All right. We look forward to all those plans, obviously, and we look forward to seeing you as well. Thank you for talking to us, Carmelle.
Thank you so much, David. All right, take care. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you.